Alright, today I'm going to be doing a 55-inch Sony XBR backlight repair. The unit turns on with 6x red flash, but it has a problem because of that, and what we found is the backlights of the LCD panel have failed, and so we're going to go ahead and do a full rebuild on it. So I'll just show you what it looks like first before I start taking it apart. This was a customer's unit. Get the extension cord. So when this unit turns on, we get no video, but we get color, and it blinks red 6 times. If it wants to come on anymore. There it is. Okay, so we have power down here, right? It's going to be white. It may or may not get video, and then the unit should go into shutdown. All right, so we have video, and it just went into shutdown. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That blinked red 6 times down there. So what that indicates is backlight failure. So the unit is turning on. It's got indication of backlight because you're able to see the on-screen display for a second. But what's happened internally is a number of the LEDs inside are either weak or just bad in general. So we're going to go ahead and replace them. So I'm going to bring this closer to the unit here. And on this unit here, I'm going to bring my camera over here, is you're going to have a number of screws that are around the exterior. All of those are going to have to come out, every single one. Of course, your Walmart brackets, if you have some on here too, like so, those guys will have to come out. And all of the other boards and such are going to have to come out as well. So every single screw has to come out first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. So in this case, I use a Panasonic drill. Best drill on the market for this kind of job. So if you need one, I recommend the EY6220 Panasonic drill. Battery operated. You don't have to worry about over torquing or anything like that. And with this unit, the power cord is built into the power supply. So you'll have to remove the cover first. And then down here, I'll show you this real quick. navigate my cable here. Got many cables floating around in here. Press down on this right here, and that'll take care of it. And off comes your power cord. Oh. All right, here's your back off the set. So here's what the back of this TV looks like with nothing else attached to it. Mover my here. For the interference and such. All right. So we have your power supply. We have your motherboard over there. Actually, see what I'm doing. All right. You have your power supply. You have your motherboard, and then you've got your timing control board. All of that you may have to rip out in this case, but the most important thing to start with first is getting these perimeter screws off of this bezel, because you'll have to take that off in order to get underneath this TV. And of course, you have to take the speakers out, because otherwise they'll start dangling. So let me do that first. Speakers are out. Let's see, have to get a smaller bit. So I recommend a PH1 bit. Makita makes some good bits. These gold-plated ones. They work nice on an adapter. Probably cost you maybe $7 or $8. It's worth it. It's good to have around the house too if you got small screws. And it gets these little screws out of the bezel. If you have a tough time getting a screw out or something like that, just try a lower torque setting on your driver first. That way you don't strip the screw. Tight. We'll leave that one in there. Let's see. Disconnect those two pieces at the bottom. They're basically just for mount supports. Let's see. More screws go in there. Take off these two for the bracket mounts. These are covering the perimeter of the bezel. And if it's your first time ever doing this, always wise to take a picture of what you're doing first, that way you know how to put it all back together. I've had to do that plenty of times. Every TV is just a little bit different. You never know what you're going to run into. Let's see, we're going to have to take the screws off of the T-con plate. Just go ahead and disconnect this. 1, 2, and the antenna 3. It's just your IR PCB and remote Bluetooth device. Let's see. Disconnect your LVDS FFC cables from your main board to your T-con. And then underneath, just make a quick little show of this here. Underneath all that, we have the T-con. Down here is the T-con, and under there is your ribbon cables. You're going to want to pull those out before you take the T-con off, otherwise you'll snap the connectors off of the panel, and that would be bad. That would be the end of the TV. Very simple, but you just got to be patient with it. First, you got to take off the bezel that's right there that I just showed first, because you can't get to it without it. So there's a bezel plate that protects that area that connects the bus card to the T-con. The only thing with these Sonys, when you compare it to like a Samsung or an LG, just a lot more things going on, more intricate, more things to take apart, and more things that can go wrong. So just be very careful. Be patient. It's a job. Okay, bring those off. Thanks, Steve. So that piece comes off now, and that's for the bus cards that are hooked to the bottom of the panel. So now once those two pieces are off, you will then take off these connectors, which are right here, and it just clicks. Just like that. Clicks, comes right out. Same thing with this one. Clicks up and pops right out. All right. So where do we attack next? Let's get this screw out. I don't know if these panels have like tabs on them or anything where you actually have to click them out like the Samsungs do or the LGs. So it'll be a lot easier to work on this, because even though there's more screws that go around the perimeter and such, you don't have to worry about the tabs and going under boards, it looks like in some of these cases. So it looks like with this model, you can leave the power supply alone, the motherboard alone, and the only thing you have to worry about is disconnecting the T-con, because that plate overlaps the perimeter of the bezel. So Let's see if I've got the screws off here to where I can get to this. Because it looks like with this one, the bezel pops right off, but it's got these little mounting brackets on the corners, and you just got to make sure you take those off first so you can pop each one off. Comes off sort of like a frame you would get from like a Michael's Arts and Crafts store or something like that. Pop that off. Let's see. Sometimes you have to shock these things to get them loose. There we go. All right. And that's the first part of the bezel right there. Really, it doesn't look like you need to take both screws off. You probably only need to take one because they connect each other. And if you take one off, it frees it up. So it basically stays on that part of the bezel that's popped off. So not necessarily. So if you run into a script screw or something, don't fret it. As long as the other one comes off, it should be good. So this one should pop right out too. I think. Right? Ah, it's got these clips. Okay. Flathead. Just kind of pop them up a little bit. Should come right off. Ah, that's good. Good stuff. That's your left bezel. All right. Let's go here on the right side. Disconnect the screw on the bottom. So get this in. Keep your screws nice and tidy. Get like a little organizer, or just keep them in piles. Either way, you kind of have an idea of where they got to go back down the road. Flathead screwdriver out. This thing pops right off. All right. There's your left piece. And then you should be able to get the bottom to where the panel is going to be totally idle. And that's when we'll start getting into the fun part of getting the panel actually removed. And usually there's double-sided tape, and that becomes a fun chore because you might need to use a little bit of heat sometimes to get them loose. Other times you just kind of pop them right off and they're ready to roll. No one ever said this was going to be easy. There's your bottom bezel. So 100 screws later, we finally get to the actual panel piece. All right. So let me just show you a quick little detail of what it looks like now without it. Here's the unit. We've removed the bezel from the perimeter, and we have the bus cards that are hooked to the bottom of the panel. To get these guys loose, you'll see it should just come right up. Let's see how they are here. It should just come up and out if I remember correctly on this model. Yeah, there's these little divots right here that you have to, let's see if I get it right there, to where you have to get them over top of that, otherwise they'll stick. So let me do something here real quick to get them off. Just use your both hands here. Just be gentle with them. You break them, that's the end of the TV, because unfortunately that's part of the panel. So it's now loose, like so, and then we'll do it on the other side. There we go. Happy TV over here. All right, so now we have them both loose. So the panel in reality is separated from the set now. But they use double-sided tape, that adhesive, and that's is where the fun begins getting this thing apart. And this is why you charge $400 to fix something like this. The kit itself might only be $100, but the labor portion of this, it's a lot of work. And as you see, it's taken me 20 minutes just to even get to this point. So, see how this panel holds up here, because we'll find out whether or not it's sticking. You do not want to touch the panel in any way, shape, or form. Get it up by the sides. See if it comes loose. I'm just going to lift it up very gently. Okay, so the panel's kind of loose. Good start. All right, panel actually came loose. So let me move this off here. Oh. There's your filter sheet. Not exactly how I wanted it, but it worked. So now, here is the filter sheets in behind the screen, and there's our LCD panel in one piece. So I'm going to leave the LCD panel alone just like that. I'm going to lay these right on top of that for now. Go ahead and clean that off later before we put it back on. Get any dust off. And then I'm going to transition here, move this out of the way. And bring this cart into play. Let's see. Got another cart around here. Instead of using the one with the panel on it, all right, we'll use this one. Take this off. Here. And cart gets back in place. This was the last filter. All right, so now what we have is this, which is basically your panel with the inner filter sheet. We're going to go ahead and start taking that apart now to get to where the LEDs are. Sometimes when you take these apart, they're a little tricky. Just take a flat blade, just go around the edges, and that'll pop them all loose. If you crack one or something like that, it is what it is. They're sometimes very fragile. There's not a whole lot you can do. I'm just shocked that the panel came off so easily. Most of these, there's always double-sided adhesive, and it can take you another 30 minutes to get the damn thing off. But that one, it decided to trick me. So the first one I ever did of these was a KDL 65W850D, so 65-inch, whereas this is the 55. And it took me 4.5 hours to do it. First time I'd ever done a Sony, but it was just the thing that stuck to everything. And so it took me an hour just to get the panel loose in the bezel. So that was fun. But in the long run, it worked somehow, some way. So from here on, I've been doing Sonys, and I'd say this is probably in the neighborhood of my 20th or 25th Sony. I do a lot more LGs. I've probably done well over 100 LGs. Probably the same neighborhood of Samsungs. But, and I've even done some TCLs. But I've not done too many of these. And also, a great place to watch good videos on this kind of stuff is Shop Jimmy. They have a really good kit, and that's actually where I get my LEDs from. Because the majority of the time with Sony, you can't get their kit, whether it be from Encompass or Sony Direct or whoever you order from. Best place to go is Shop Jimmy. And if you ever have problems, they're always there to assist, and they can help you get through your TV repair. And that's actually where I got the kit for this one. And off comes the bezel. Right here. There we go. And here is the larger filter sheet. It's more like a piece of glass. You just gotta be careful with it because you don't want to crack it. Okay. All right, now that's that out of the way. This is what we're left with. We'll go ahead and remove this filter sheet out of the way as well. This is more just for the light diffusing. Now, we've gotten to the LEDs. So, in this model, it's not full array, it's edge lit. And, let's see here, sometimes you can kind of see if one of them are bad or not. But just show you what this thing kind of looks like. So here's what it looks like without everything inside of it. Down here at the bottom are the LEDs. Sometimes you can see one that's burnt or looks a little dark. I don't really see anything, so I doubt you're going to be able to see it either. But here's the row of LEDs at the bottom. Right down there. One kind of looks like up close. It's really not going to look like a whole lot, but that's your that's what we're going to be replacing here. So with this one, let me see how they've given me the kit from Jimmy. Let's see. There we go. Get my cutters here. Open up the box. This is how Shop Jimmy will ship them to you. They come in this kind of triangular shaped box here. So usually, sometimes they'll ship them with a plate, sometimes they won't. So let's see how this one comes. Yeah, it just comes as a strip. Get double-sided adhesive on it. So this is how apparently they ship them. Looks just like that. So we'll have to remove the old strips with a little bit of heat, or I'll use a little bit of pliers, or just a straight edge, and then we'll see if we can get the adhesive off, because the adhesive right there is on the back. Panel there. I don't want that panel getting touched. Thanks. So now, I'm going to go ahead and see what we got here and how they're laid out. Probably going to go ahead and take a screwdriver, pull the whole brace out, because it looks like the connector goes underneath the board, or the, I mean, under the bracket. So, go ahead and get the screwdriver. low. Get all these screws off. And I'll show you up close what it looks like before I start taking it apart. Fortunately, there's no real way to test these without putting it all back together first. But here's what it looks like. So, connectors are right under here. Pop those off. One connector. Just be very careful with it. Just take your time. It will snap, and then you got major problems. So then you got to replace the harness. All right. Second one came off. Sometimes you'll see with these when they overheat and go bad over time, those connectors will get hot. I don't see that with these, but if you do notice that, you'll see a little orange tint on the harness, maybe a little blackened. Replace the harness as well. All right, so now that we have those loose, we can get to the strip. Probably just kind of jab your screwdriver right down into it, see if they'll come loose. If they will, great. Not recommend a heat gun. Heat guns are great with this. Shop Jimmy makes a nice heat gun as well, or they offer one for like 20 bucks or so. It does great. They have one that's around the house. Takes adhesive off of things, so I'd recommend it if you can use it for any reason. Just keep it away from your connector. That way it doesn't burn up the connector in any way, shape, or form. Get them there tight. Yeah. So it's right there tight. There we go. Oh, work. All right. Over on the other side now. They use like that white filter paper down there, and it's just a pain to get that thing loose. Without that paper in the way, it makes it a lot easier to wear away. So I'll have to see if I can find something that'll replicate that. All right. Get a little blowout here. Things any of the stuff off the panel here. Want to get into the screen. All right. So now that we have that off, we're officially halfway done. It's taken roughly 40 minutes. So now, put the new one in. Here's your strip. You want to get it right against the metal. Down on. And use the little guide at the bottom to kind of give you an idea of how to put this thing in there. Maybe you know you're doing it right. should be flush up against the rear of the metal bracing. Once you do that, just pressing it around, because what will happen is once these things start to work, the heat itself will start to make it stick. Once the heat breaks into the adhesive, it'll loosen it up a little bit, and then once it cools back down, it'll be stuck, just like how hard it was to get that thing off the first time. It'll do the same way the second time. All right. So now that we have those in place, go ahead and do the other side. And now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and connect the tabs. And then I'll look to see what I can do as far as replacing that filter sheet that I had to peel off. There is no reusing that. That thing is just old. This set's, 5 years, 6 years old. You can't just peel that stuff off and expect it to work. Might just use a little bit of tape. Highly reflective tape, maybe. That'll probably work just fine. Okay, so now the tabs are back in place. Go back around. Go ahead and line it up. All right. Let's see. Keys back in place. Yeah, these things are shot to. Ain't no reason that. Head no?
Yeah.
All right.
Jeff has two that aren't committed that voicemails twice.
Okay.
That they should call back 3 times your sheets as well.
Sounds like a plan. Have a good rest of your evening. Grab some water here. Let's see what I can do as far as
If Poppy has that, I left it on the cabinet, that note that he called about the air conditioner not being running.
yeah, it doesn't seem like it's working.
No, and I called or emailed, and they're gonna call. The note I got back from the guy upstairs is that they're gonna.
Yeah, we don't have that problem up there either. Remember that one time it leaked real bad right there?
Yeah.
Where the condensation line broke?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well, anyway, they're gonna call a contractor or
That's good.
somebody on Monday.
We'll see him in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Anyway, I taped it on the side of the file cabinet in there in case anybody wants to see the note.
Sounds good. Tell Paul that I said hi.
Okay,
Take care. use a little bit of sticky paper. It'll work just fine for this. I've used these before when I've had to rebuild filter sheets. When I've come across some that have been burnt from LED strips, they work fine. Just cut nice thin lines with a razor blade. That way it's nice and even across those strips. And this is more or less just for reflectivity. So you're not getting the bounce back off of the silver plating. You're getting more of a white look, because that's what you should have underneath the panel. Because what will happen is those sheets here, they're going to diffuse the light for you. They're going to do the hard work. Working my way over to the other side of the strip. Just kind of overlap it. Just make sure you got a nice white lines going straight across. None of that metal is visible. And I'll show you what I have as soon as I'm done here. I just want to keep that metal bracket from diffusing the light. It'll be 100% perfect, but it's going to do the job. It's going to be a whole hell of a lot better than reusing that old tape would have done. It's that old tape. Whew. Taking that stuff apart, it's just like taking those panels apart on some of those other sets. It is a joke. There's a saying in the industry with some of these, they're not meant to be rebuilt. This is probably one of them. All right. So Show you what this thing looks like now with the strips installed. Here's your strip, and then there's the white filter tape that I've installed to block the bar straight across, all the way down there. All right, so it's just part of it. Just got to be patient. This anymore. Get the screws back into the bracket. Don't tighten them all the way in the center first, because you'll have to do like I did. Just kind of leave it just slightly loose, and then you can go back and touch them up. Okay. Place it down on that white filter sheet. Make sure it stays put. It doesn't fly off midway through. That'd be funny. Not really, but it would be. Alright. That looks like all the screws. So, kind of missed one. Let me grab one from over here real quick. I might have flown off somewhere. You know what? I don't think this one has one. No, never mind. I was right. I got all the screws. All right. But that one's too deep for the rest of them. So now that we have all the screws back in, it's time to put everything back together. So we're going to start with our reflective sheet. Let's see. Like this. So it looked like the key one was at top. So we're going to go ahead and put the key one back in place just like that. Yeah, it fits right in the top. Just going to give you a quick glimpse real quick. There is the key slot right there. But just make sure when you put that filter sheet back in, key slot goes right back up top. All right, next, the next filter sheet back in. Oh, sorry, almost forgot. The glass, that's the next thing I'm gonna put back in there. Let's see. It's not really glass, but it looks like it. So we just caught a really thick piece of plastic and it looks like glass. And it just sits in there just like that. There we go. One of the stages of diffusion. The light there should just sit right into place. It's only going to go in one way because it's keyed, just like the other one. There for 1 second. We'll answer our phone call here. Of course, as soon as Wyatt leaves, somebody calls. sheet. This one sits in there. Maybe some of these are, doesn't matter, some of these are the exact same on both sides. Pretty much just going whatever way. Let's see, you know what this goes in first. So before you do that, let's go ahead and put this one back in first, as these things have keys on the sides of the plastic. That's why it didn't make any sense for a minute there. There we go. Put this guy back in place, and they're all keyed. They have little divots in the bracket that go into the plastic. Dandelion in there. It's funny. Everything's in place there. All right, now I put the filter sheet on there because they have little keyed spots that go around the bezel. Let's see how they align. Important to get the debris out of there so it doesn't get in the way of the picture when you're watching it. Because it's never fun to have to take this thing all back apart again. Had to do it plenty of times, but this is the way of trying to prevent that from happening. There we go. course, everybody calls now, but secretary's gone. All right. I think this one actually just kind of sits underneath of the. Okay. Yeah, that's what it is. So this one actually is not the keyed one. This one sits underneath of the bezel. That makes sense. It sits over top of the plastic, but it goes underneath of it, if that makes sense. You can't just put it on there first. It still has to boot away. So it's more fun to the job of fixing these things. Might have been a little bit easier if I just done it that way to begin with. Just putting it on and just kind of key it in. Yeah, because it's kind of ripping. Let me go ahead and redo this part here. Fortunately, this is what happens sometimes in this business. You kind of have to go back over it over and over again. And of course, the phone, you get interfered with, all that kind of fun stuff. Happens. Yeah, that looks much better. Just gonna make sure this filter sheet doesn't ripple. when you put it in there, otherwise you'll get a distorted looking image. Just make sure when you clip these ends in place, you don't push back on them or they ripple the sheet. They should just go down onto the panel. You're always getting inside, but it's a pain in the butt. And then you end up having to redo it and redo it. So, there we go. All right, finally got it. So now we have the filter sheet back in place. Just go around, check to make sure everything's clipped in. That's good. Nice. Hangs in. Of course, they go in easy, they come out easier, and they don't go back in. All right, we are back in. If I have to, I'll show the trick on how to use the handlebars here in a minute. All right, now diffusers. Gotta go back in. Looks like it's it goes right over top. Yeah, that's where your keys are. Thankfully, with this one, it sits right on the top. I don't have to fight it all that hard. So this one is a lot easier to get out. Just gonna stick it in place. Fit right in the frame. Let's see. So that's all it does. Okay. I wonder if all this stuff goes underneath there. That's weird. Why would you do that with a panel like this? So there's that one. So these just kind of slide underneath the bezel of all places. There's no actual clip for these to go in place. So, again, just be patient. All right. Fuses are in place. So let's go ahead and blow off the back of the panel. Get a microfiber. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just try to get as much of the length off the panel as you can, as otherwise you're going to be seeing it the whole time. And that's not fun. All right. So the bottom of the panel is facing me, so the bottom of the panel is going to be down. So the way that this panel sits is it's gonna sit flush to the border of the panel perimeter itself. It'll kind of sit in place on the edge, so that way the tabs are in place. So just make sure your tabs are sticking out here, because otherwise you want to crush them when you put them back together. So that'll crack the panel, or it'll damage the panel's overall usability. You just have it kind of sit in place. There's these grooves. I'll show you real quick. There are these grooves right here. And you just got to make sure the panel kind of sits in place. You don't want them overlapping, because otherwise, when you put the perimeter back on, it'll crack the panel. So you just got to be patient. Take your time. You're not going anywhere. You just want to watch TV again. Just be super patient with it. Especially if this is the first one you've ever done. I don't recommend it if it's the first time you've ever done one, because even for me, it's hard. Not something I recommend to somebody first doing their first TV. Recommend maybe trying a Samsung or an LG first. They're much easier. Alright, so check your four corners. Make sure the panel's not resting on top of any of them. If it is, adjust it accordingly. Okay. That looks pretty good right there. So we'll go ahead and put the edges back on first. On the bottom and the top. Go to the bottom first. Just kind of hear it click in place. What you do, pull this over the edge so it's clicked. Yeah, that's good. All right, go to the top. really not a whole lot to the top there. And then the edges. Go. Adjust it and flip it around here. Just needs to get on. Top it off for now. And it just kind of sits in place. Yeah, not quite at the top goes. We go to the sides and the bottom. When you put these on, don't put any pressure on the panel. Just kind of let it key itself in. Just be patient with it. Okay. I got something to work with. The sides end, you can pretty much kind of work with it like that. And then you can do the bottom afterward. I like to keep the bottom in for this case because you don't have to worry about the tabs getting caught. Go ahead and flip it. Push that down just a little. Now we put the top end. Here's also where you can adjust your tabs. You have this thing like this. Loosen up the bottom again. As you know, you gotta make sure those tabs are in place. Okay. Now that they're keyed, go ahead and put them back in place. top of the bezel. Just want to make sure I wasn't doing that backwards. So the bezel goes on first. Let's go put some screws in it. Oh. Reconnect your LVS ring cables to T-con. Okay. Power supply connector. Just gonna put some screws back in the T-con here. Use those black Loctite ones. Alright, put the top on the panel. And we can start putting the braces on, and we can test it out and see what we got. Put a couple screws down in here so these things don't move. The one that goes back into the splitter brace. Yeah. And the other one that goes back into. Alright, put the other one the splitter brace. Put the other ones around the edges. Let's see how we get this guy back on there. That's a tight fit. So don't let that part fool you. That part is not an easy part to put back on there. All right, put your 4 screws back in place. And then we'll go ahead and put the braces back on the panel. And at that point, we can test the panel itself and see what it looks like with the new LED bar. An hour and 30 minutes later, right? Okay. Hopefully I didn't crack the panel or nothing stupid. And let's see. Yeah, that's a perimeter spell. Check to see if there's any screws missing. Good. Okay, so the bezel screws are all back on. Don't need the speakers or anything like that to test it. Just need your sensor. Yep. Let's see if this thing turns back on. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I gotta fix those filters down there. That's all a part of this game. So the video is staying on, but those filter sheets need to be adjusted a little bit inside the panel. So I'm going to take the panel back apart again. But as you can tell, it's working now. It just needs to have the sheets adjusted. So there, in essence, is a repair for a Sony. I'll have to spend another hour or so having to take the thing all back apart again, but at least I know it works now. So what I'll have to do is take the bezel back off, and I'll have to adjust the clips along the panel down there at the bottom. It looks like it stays on. Let's see. Yeah, you can see it's working now, but the sheets need to be adjusted a little bit. So I just got to figure out how to adjust it to where I can get this thing to be stable. Looks like the diffuser's just on the top there. So what I'll have to do is take the panel back apart and adjust the diffusers themselves to where I can get in underneath there again and put it all back in there. That's all part of the process, but at least it works. So, anywho, that's a good video on how to get these things apart and put them all back together. So I will talk to you all later.